Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about strategization. I actually can pronounce that word now. And kind of ways to go about it and ways to have better strategy, right? Because it's one thing to just learn more strategies and, learn, like, basically just memorize by the book, like, different ways to do things. But I think it's a much more helpful thing, and another thing entirely, to learn a methodology by which you can strategize better going forward, right? So that's kind of what I want to talk about, is a strong methodology for sort of improving your strategization and your means of developing strategies, right? So, yeah. Let's talk about that. And the main idea I want to cover here is that of kind of defaults. Because generally speaking, having a strong default plan is really, really helpful to have for a couple of reasons. For starters, it is a huge load off of comms if everyone already knows what to do. And if I do end up making a kind of remake of my comms video, which might happen, then I will absolutely hammer this point home, where a lot of improving comms comes from map reviewing, actually, and having a good idea of what everyone is doing in a certain situation. Because, for example, you're going to see something like what's happening right now, where the other team's down 2 soldiers, meaning they're down a lot of spam, meaning rather than like a traditional, well, even if they double sacked Soldier Scout into Sunshine 2, then we would still try to take space and potentially like dry push the point. But down 2 soldiers, absolutely that's going to happen. And that's not that rare of a situation, right? Like, teams don't go down 2 soldiers all the time, but it's still common enough that you will see a team be down 2 soldiers, and on this point you're trying to push off of that. So knowing what everyone is doing in a situation like that is really important. And, from a comms perspective, basically just, the combo is articulating where they want to go. Well, for starters, the comm of their down both soldiers, let's try and take space or dry push or whatever. And then just a call of where the combo's going. And that's really it. Everyone knows what door they want to go to. The combo is obviously going to the door that they called, and then the flank is going to the opposite door and clearing that. And then from there on out, what is being communicated kind of just helps coordinate the timing, right? Of, you hear the scout, clearing traps, and you hear, like the pocket soldier making space or whatnot. You hear calls about what their soldiers are doing, whether they're bombing or not. And from the flank, you can kind of suss out, how far along your combo is pushing, when you want to push, just stuff like that. Yeah, just communication stuff. But the point I'm trying to make here is that for a default, it really takes a load off of the comms, because if, for example, it's even Ubers and you want to pressure for a sack into the next point, then you don't need to articulate where every single person needs to go if you already have a default established. So, for example, pressuring into process second when you have mid, the call can be as simple as let's pressure IT or let's pressure sewer, and then everyone knows what that entails. Teams I've played on, when it's called let's pressure IT, I like to stay choke as the demo. I don't have to, but as a team, we know that's the default, that I'm going to be chilling choke. So maybe my med will like give me a buff or something before rotating, or I'll ask for one. But everyone knows where to go, and there doesn't need to be any coordination comms there, because the coordination was done outside a game. Everyone knows what that default entails, right? So defaults are really important to kind of learn and talk through as a team from a comms perspective, because it really eases up what comms need to be made. Because something just as simple as we're playing evens, everyone kind of knows what positioning that entails, and you get a robust enough hold off of that call alone. And then if anything specific is happening, let's say, a soldier is getting spammed off their door in an even Uber situation, then they can call that. There's no other random stuff about, oh, I need to go here, you need to go here. None of that. You just hear the, oh, I have to go resup, I'm not on my door, and then someone can go rotate and whatnot. So it definitely eases things from a comms perspective. But I want to talk about the strategy, because defaulting does help you develop more strategies, or rather develop strategies on the fly and adjust to the other team's plans on the fly. Because it's very easy to understand what you might need to adjust. So for starters, let us talk about, let's imagine a Sunshine Last hold, right? And this will illustrate another thing that I was going to touch on, which is the fact that, defaults, well, generally speaking, most people do play the points in similar ways or the same ways. It doesn't have to be that way. And Sunshine Last is an example where you see kind of two different styles of default. You have the one where a demo is holding close top left, and I was maybe hoping we would randomly be holding last when this was happening, but I'm sure we'll hold last at some point in this demo, and I can point it out again. So you get a visual example later on. But a demo holding close top left, just locking down that door. Roamer is going to be holding the right side, and then Pocket can kind of just be, playing between them, doing whatever. And you have your medic, more towards the left side. Your gun is probably on point, watching the left side. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. If the other team starts pressuring right, then you have not only a pocket soldier who can be fade bombing or spamming out that door, but also your demo can rotate over from the left side. So it's a robust enough plan. A lot of teams do that. But there's another default that you see a lot, which is the central demo, where a demo is not really on a door in the traditional sense. They're playing very central, and they are strictly planning to rotate to whatever door the other combo pressures, whether that be right or left. The demo on the floor centrally is going to be a little bit worse at holding top left, but not by much. The other team's not going to really be able to peek it much. It's a small doorway, so you aren't losing too much there. And you also kind of free up your pocket to be more of a dedicated left watcher as a result as well, which is nice. And the gun can still be on the point, or it can be in front of the point even, with your heels in front of the point. Just pretty robust plan. And what's nice about that is that it really makes right side a lot harder to pressure, and you can see actually we're pressuring the other team's right now. Definitely the easier door to take space through. It makes that a little difficult, or a little more difficult to pressure, because the demo is just so much closer, and in some cases can kind of preemptively rotate, right? Which can be really nice. So yeah, that's another default, and they both have the positives and negatives. You are giving up a little bit of defensive pressure on the left side door in favor of really locking down the right side and making it much more difficult for the other team to take space. And yeah, that can be a benefit. And also, generally speaking, the second default with the more centralized demo and the med more central as well is a better plan for anti-sniper contingencies, I guess. And oftentimes teams will transition into that default against the sniper, which there are actually like anti-sniper default plans where if you find out the other team has a sniper, you just change things a little bit. So again, all the more reason to kind of figure out those defaults and learn when you might want to be using them. So yeah, we can see an example here where not only is a default not just something set in stone and is actually something that you and your team can do and tailor to your own preferences, but also that it starts to, as you learn about them and why you're doing them, you start to suss out the advantages and disadvantages. So for example, if you're holding your demo top left on Sunshine Last and even Ubers, and the other team is really doing a good job of taking space right and applying a lot of pressure, then you might want to adjust and bring your demo more central. When you start to understand, and this is actually a topic I've made an entire video on as well, is when you start to understand the actual fundamentals behind your decision making and the fundamentals behind what is working for you and those defaults, then it becomes much easier to adjust things and tweak things to not only your own preference as a team, but also, what is necessary for what the opponents are doing to try and counter them, right? So it helps you make more robust plans and helps you strategize better and more specifically against the team that you're playing, because you kind of have that fundamental understanding of what's going on and you know that default. So from a place like that, it's very easy. Let's offer another example. So imagine on Gully Wash, you want to pressure into last, but the other team's demo is pushed up really, really close in main, like almost peeking into lobby. And that's causing a huge problem for you guys because as you're trying to set up the pressure cook or whatever you want to do, then you're just eating a ton of spam from this demo who's kind of over-aggressed in main. And that poses a problem for you guys. Well, that's actually a huge weakness for the other team because that demo is severely out of position. And it's very easy. For example, if you don't have like a good default plan and don't really know what you like to do, generally speaking, in even Ubers or pressuring into last on Gully Wash, then it can be really, really difficult to deal with, even though it seems so simple, right? You just get a guy on him and kill him. But if you need to articulate exactly where everyone's going and like all these things, it becomes actually a little overwhelming because you not only need to know exactly what you want to do in general in this position, but you need to know exactly what you want to do in the specifics against what this demo is doing in particular. But if you have a default and you know, okay, well, when we pressure cook, we like to have our combo play in lobby with our flank playing in river. Usually our flank scout can go into water, and then our demo can peek launchpad, our pocket soldier can peek shutter, and our roamer can be peeking river for, you know, pressuring all those doors simultaneously. And our pocket scout can watch main, something like that. Just general default, that's what, you know, teams that I've played on do. But anyway, if you have that kind of default plan, then suddenly it's very easy to adjust to kill this demo, right? You can just have your pocket soldier go wood, for example, and have your flank scout and pocket soldier like both run at that demo at the same time. Something like that. It's easy to adjust the plan. Everyone else kind of knows what they need to do. And also, if oh, can you imagine if that hit? But also, if you know, as you adjust things, you know which doors are suddenly no longer being watched, which ones are now, and everyone can adjust as a result in order to kind of adapt and just be malleable and be flexible in general. Okay, and I think actually Gully Wash last pressure cooks in general are a really good example of like ultimate flexibility. You can kind of pressure cook into any last, theoretically. But Gully is really the most natural one too, and that's the one that like even lower div teams, like even main teams, will pressure cook into Gully last rather than just try and spam down the gun and double sack, right? And there's good reason for that. The last is very small, meaning your spam can actually do a fair amount of damage, and also just be harder to dodge in general, just closer range. But also, there are 3 doors that you can peek, kind of 4 if you include main, but not really. But because of the fact that river can lead into water behind point, right? Because you can sneak a guy behind the point through river and have them pressure the point and potentially cap the point. This is usually a scout for obvious reasons. That usually forces the other team to bring a soldier on top of the point to watch that and make sure that is not something that they can just cap and win the game, right? But if you bring that soldier, suddenly there's only 2 spam classes holding 3 doors, meaning a door is free. So if you pressure all 3 doors at the same time, someone is going to get some value because, you know, their door should be free. So spamming down a gun becomes much easier. Pressuring a medic becomes much easier. Getting damage on a med, something like that, becomes much easier. And yeah, you can get a lot of value for that. But a pressure cook is a very dynamic situation because, you know, there's so many moving pieces at once. If one player is peeking too much and overcommits and dies, then the whole plan is kind of wasted, right? And you may have just been better off sacking. But if things go well, you can keep focusing different things down. You get the gun, okay, everyone like reloads a little bit, you re-peek, try and get damage on the medic. Maybe there's a player out of position that you try and focus down. Maybe your flank scout is about to pressure the point, so you as a demo from launchpad trap off the front of the point. So if anyone drops down to try and stop the cap, then you can just dead on them and kill them, stuff like that. And it becomes a very dynamic situation that you can on the fly do any number of things that you want, very specific to in the moment what the other team is doing. However, each of these things are only ever possible because you guys already have established basic default positionings that are robust enough that all the doors are being watched, you're not going to be getting flanked from anyone, and everyone can get some form of value. Or anyone can get some form of value, I suppose, depending on which doors are being held. So as a result, it's, an example of that default providing the backbone on which you can strategize. Yeah, very important. And I guess that's kind of the whole point of what I'm trying to get at, is doing that work outside of game, establishing default holds and what you want to do as a default, helps you strategize in the specifics, whether that be in the moment or whatnot. And also, as you get presented with more of these situations, the specifics become a lot easier to handle, right? So if, for example, you're down 2 on a point and you want to exchange, then that happens enough and everyone kind of has a decent idea of where they want to position in that what should be like a pretty specific situation of like trying to play an exchange while down 2 on like a certain point. But, if you default enough and have those kind of defaults set up, then suddenly those situations that seem very specific start to look pretty similar, actually. Which in and of itself does help you learn as well. If you are trying to pressure into process last, for example, and every single time you do it, people are in different positions, then your brain's not going to pick up those pattern recognition cues of what's working and what isn't. But if everyone's in the same position, especially like if you're on the same team with the same players, then what works and what doesn't, you will start to pick up on, and you'll start to learn kind of how aggressive you can get versus what's just feeding, and what doors you can or can't peek, things like this. And the more stuff that gets standardized, not only the easier it is for you to learn, but also the easier it is for you to adapt. So yeah, that's probably all I have to talk about. Overall, defaults, really good idea. It's just every high level team has default plans, and you will watch when these teams play, most of their comms are not about what... It's hard to describe because it's not necessarily about like trying to reiterate stuff that everyone already knows, right? It's saying one thing that's kind of that keyword that everyone knows what that means. For example, let's play to pop through. So, if we're on last here, let's say we hold this last, which I don't know if we do. We probably don't. We lost this pug. But let's say we hold this last and it's add. If everyone on the other team's alive, then we probably just want to pop through. So if someone just calls, okay, let's just use through lower left. Everyone knows what that means. The combo knows what door they're going to and what door or what they're going to be doing when they get there. The flank knows where they should be positioned and how aggressive they should be, because as the flank member, you can maybe expect the other team's going to try to shove behind and backcap as the entire combo is pushing forward very suddenly. So you might want to play a little bit passively and just be spotting things and ready to take the fights or whatnot. Everyone knows exactly what to do off of a very simple comm. You watch high-level teams, and very little of their comms are about specifics of what's being watched or who's positioned where, unless that's like very relevant info that's not in like a default kind of setup, right? So anyway, that's probably all I have to talk about. Defaults, very important for developing more robust and more specific strategies. And also just important to take a load off on comms and also just have a good idea of what you generally want to do. Honestly, you can get pretty far with just defaults and just flowchart kind of decision making of, basic player math. Oh, they're down to, we can pressure. If it's a point like mid or something, then you might be able to take space. If it's last, not so much, just counter sack basically. Stuff like that. Just basic flowchart stuff can get you quite far. Yeah. So anyway, that's all I have to talk about. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.